Hey guys, it's Ninja. I spent about 5 hours dueling on the PTS and messing around with the stand blade. And I have some feedback that I could give ZeniMax on how they could fix stuff for update 35 so people aren't so pissed off. And more importantly, so their game isn't so boring. A lot of the balance changes were fine, in my opinion. Some of the gear set changes were fine. There's just a couple of things that are really not right that need to be fixed, in my opinion. And first thing is going to be the heavy attack changes. So I know I talked about it before on the channel, and I was in support of it. And I don't think heavy attack should be a quarter of your damage per second on a DPS dummy. I do think that's true. But Zos kind of went the other end and made it about like 1% of your damage. In duels, light attacks were hitting on average for 800 damage, and then a fully charged heavy attack would hit 1700. Now, comparatively on live server, that's about like, it's about half or even less. I think on live, light attacks do like 2,000, and then heavy attacks do like 5,000 or 7,000, depending if they crit or not. So this is a pretty big difference. Now, what I did find on the PTS is that if you manage to find a source of major empower, that your light and heavy attacks are pretty similar to what they actually are on live right now. Which I kind of see where they're going with that balance. But I don't want the only way that I could do damage with light and heavy attacks is through a fucking empower buff. The reason that light attacks and heavy attacks need to do some kind of damage is it promotes this active combat. And what you see on a lot of these parses and in a lot of these duels on the PTS and stuff is you put up like your 6 dots on a DPS dummy, and then you just use your spammable like 8 times. And duels come down to who has the stronger spammable and who just has more stats. The advantage that heavy and light weaving gave you on like especially builds that just weren't optimal was that you could fit in and keep up with like let's say you had a magic dragonite that didn't light weave and they were just applying a bunch of dots and stuff. If I was on a Magden and I was still weaving in heavies and lights, I could still sorta get close to their damage just because I was able to use my skill to land light and heavy attacks between skills. And also heavy attacks were delayed bursts. So on my stand blade, for instance, there were a lot of times where I would wind up a heavy attack and then a bow. And on live server, that heavy attack's can do like, 7k, maybe the bow does like 10 or 15k or something. So that's effectively like a 20k burst. But if you look at it on PTS, when you do that with a normal heavy attack, no empower or anything, that heavy attack's only going to do like 1700 or 2k, not even 2k. So that's a whole lot less burst, and it's just not fun. It makes it feel like there's no point to weaving. You don't get any extra damage for delaying attacks. You don't really get extra damage for keeping up light attacks. There's just no point. It's not enough reward. So what I think ZeniMax could really do to help like promote faster, more engaging combat, because this combat looks boring as hell with light attacks and heavy attacks doing basically no damage. They just need to take what's on live server and just half the damage of heavy attacks and light attacks. That's it. Just cut it in half. I know that heavy attack builds were a problem in very niche specs, like the heavy attack build for Dragon Knights. I think they are fixing that though, with Molten Armaments making it also empower rather than a unique heavy attack damage buff. So I already don't think you're going to have that problem. And if a player does spec into an Inferno heavy attack build, I feel like they should be able to get 10k heavy attacks. And remember that they're also nerfing Oaken in this patch, so those people aren't going to have major force, they're not going to have 40% heavy attack damage. So they're already losing like half of their damage right there. And then you want to nerf light and heavy attacks on top of that, and then you want to impose all this shit. It's just not effective. Nobody likes it. This is boring. The only thing that separates ESO PvE wise now with these trials where you just put down 8 dots and then spam surprise attack 8 times in a row, that you might as well just be playing World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy, because it's basically just a tab targeting game where you just spam one button. Except those games probably have a more interesting and robust rotation, because ESO is literally just going to be put down your wall of elements and then spam surprise attack. So ZeniMax, this is boring. This is not why we play ESO. We play Elder Scrolls Online for action combat, fast-paced combat. We play it to engage ourselves, to have a lot of outlets to show our skill, show our mastery of the game. This is not what I meant. Like, I don't think heavy attacks and light attacks should be like a quarter of your damage per second against a DPS dummy, but they shouldn't be 5%. In my opinion, it should be roughly 15, maybe 18%. Like, you can tone them down without completely gutting them. And if heavy attack damage is too high in PvP, the developers talked about an unhealthy relationship of heavy attack builds between PvE and PvP. Well, you have Battle Spirit. And you've shown that you can add Battle Spirit clause to skills, because on the PTS, you have a Battle Spirit clause for Reaper's Mark saying that the heal goes through Battle Spirit. So why can't you just do the same thing with heavy attacks and light attacks? Keep them how it is. Put on Battle Spirit. While you have Battle Spirit active, you take 50% less damage from heavy attacks and light attacks. That's it. It's really not that hard. There's no reason to change how they scale, change all the sets scaling with them, nerf everybody's DPS so that somebody can learn, or so that somebody that can't even like light attack between abilities can sort of also have just shit DPS with us. The funny thing is that this is supposed to raise the floor, but it just lowered the floor and then lowered the ceiling. It's just lowering stuff to lower it. I don't know how you DPS for 80 hours on a dummy and then lower your DPS by 35% and then ruin your combat. Like, did you just get tired after the 20-hour mark and you're like, yeah, I can't light attack weave for 80 hours straight, so I'm just gonna change the combat to where I can spam one button. Alright, that's all on the heavy attack changes, because I'm not happy with it. But I did want to talk about it. And the other thing that I think really needs to get addressed is Nocturnals ploy. So my fear, and there's a very simple fix for this actually. My fear is that if you have a Zerg and you have 5 people running Nocturnals ploy, and you all put like Ellie Drain on a target, or you're like Magdens and use Magden Beetles, and you apply both effects of Nocturnals ploy every 2 seconds, it doesn't look like there's a cooldown on the set from the item description. It just says whenever you apply those effects. So if 5 people do that to you at the same time, they could literally strip your entire buff bar, and then solo players will literally have 0 chance of fighting Zergs. How are you going to fight Zergs if you can't even buff yourself? Like, there needs to be a this can only happen once per target per 2 seconds clause to that set. So if people are in that Zerg and they are spamming major debuffs and minor debuffs to a target, that player has like 2 seconds or some time at least to respond and think of a plan, because the way that it looks right now, and if you have multiple people running that set, it looks like basically just an instant kill. Because what are you going to do? Let's say you have all your buffs, you walk up on a Zerg, bam, they take away your armor buff, they take away your brutality, they take away your crit, they take away your minor sorcery, let's say you're on a Plar, DK or something, they take away like your minor expedition, major expedition, maybe they take away your protection, maybe they take away your heroism, and they all do that within literally a second, and then you have 2 seconds to figure out what you actually lost, and then reapply it. So I think they need to add that clause where it can only happen once per target, rather than having a bunch of people activate all at the same time. And probably, now that I think about it, the duration could probably be increased a little bit, maybe once every 4 seconds. Because you have to think, if you want counterplay for this set, the player has to be able to figure out what buffs went down, and then figure out how to reapply them, or at least give them a window to respond. Because when you take away buffs like that, that's like, let's say you lose brutality, that's minus 20% power. That's minus 20% spell damage. That's more than like 2 essence thieves that you just take away from somebody just for existing. So there needs to be a little more counterplay. Maybe you could up the duration to 4 seconds and then add that per target clause. So yeah, that's my thoughts. Let me know if you guys think I'm right on this, if I'm wrong, if I'm stupid. Yeah, interested to see what you guys think as well. And I hope ZeniMax can get some useful feedback from this. Please don't go through with these changes. Actually fix them. Don't make your game boring, okay? Thank you.